So folks may recognize Roger from having been on a few weeks ago with the South Yuba River Citizens League, of which he was a founding member. But today I've asked him to come on to talk a bit about Yuba Docs, which he is the executive director of. And as you probably read in the paper, I have quite a few articles here about the situation with medical care here in the county and around the state and the country. And since Dr. Hicks is in the middle of that, I figured he'd be a great person to enlighten us on the other side of this stuff. So, Yuba Docs, how did you come to start that?
Well, I worked, I'm a board-certified emergency doctor, and for many years I worked in the emergency room while I was president of CIRCLE, the South Yuba River Citizens League. And when we finally got the river protected through wild and scenic status in 1999, I stepped down as president and had time enough to open this. While I was working in the emergency room, I noticed that people who came in, for cuts or broken bones or, emergencies that weren't life-threatening, they ended up waiting for hours and hours while I took care of, somebody who might be dying from a heart attack or a car crash or something like that. And I also worked for a brief time in Auburn at a urgent care clinic there called Sierra Doctors, and I noticed that a lot of the people that I saw there came down from Nevada County. I've lived here since the 70s, and I figured, you know what? Why should they have to commute and I have to commute to meet each other in Auburn? And there's probably a need for this in Nevada County. So we opened it in 2000.
Wow. And so, how does Yuba Docs differ from another clinic or a doctor's office?
It's different from a traditional doctor's office in that we're open 7 days a week. We're open extended hours. We open at 8 a.m. On weekdays and close at 6 p.m. We don't close for lunch. We're open from 9 to 4 Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. It's also different because it's a walk-in clinic. You don't need an appointment. So it's patient-oriented. Well, you can make an appointment if there's a particular person that, it's a doctor, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant that you want to see, but it's a walk-in clinic.
How many professionals do you have there?
There's 3 doctors and 3 mid-level practitioners, so there's 6 of us.
I bet you're kept busy all the time then.
We are, yeah.
So, one of the things I wanted to mention, and one of the reasons that I asked you to come on is there seems to be just an incredible insurance takeover of everything and everybody, and they seem to be making everything work for themselves and not work for anybody who really might need health care or anything else. Mm-hmm. So at Yuba Docs, I know you accept insurance, right, but you also don't have to have insurance to come to you guys.
Right. About a third of our patients don't have insurance. And we give people who don't have insurance a 20% discount on our fees.
It's almost unheard of, giving discounts for anything.
It's true, yeah. But we definitely cater to people that don't have insurance.
And what kind of patients do you see?
Well, we see people with cuts and broken bones or injuries, illnesses like pneumonia or the flu, colds, acute illnesses, and minor injuries. Basically, if it's a walk-in clinic, meaning you have to be able to walk in for it to be an appropriate patient. If you need an ambulance, then you really need the services of the emergency department at the hospital. But otherwise, we take care of minor emergencies. And in addition, a lot of people use this as their family doctor because we're open 7 days a week and they don't have to take time off from work to see the doctor. They can come, at 5 o'clock or on the weekends or on their day off.
I know I'm jumping around a lot on all these different things, but we had a lot of stuff that we wanted to talk about over the half hour. We're seeing now Governor Schwarzenegger has this new health care plan that he wants to put into effect. How do you feel about that?
I think the idea of extending health care to all California children is wonderful, and I know that that's what he wants to do. I think it would be good to have health insurance for all Californians, not just children.
The rest of us would enjoy that,
Yeah, I mean, it's right. 50 million Americans, or more than 50 million, don't have any health coverage, and I see the effects of that, every day at our office.
So, like, for instance, people will wait forever to come into the office before, they...
Right. They delay treatment because they don't have insurance, and they can't afford it, or make a decision that, well, I don't want to spend the money on health care right now, so I'm going to just put this off. And then it ends up getting worse, and, the problem is more serious, and it ends up being more difficult and expensive, actually, to take care of, but that's what happens.
Well, how do these... All right.
Back on the governor's plan, though, I think it's a good idea. The problem is, though, that... the problem that I see is the way he's going to fund it is with what he calls a coverage dividend. It's sort of like, double speak to me, because a coverage dividend, that sounds like it's a coverage dividend of 2% on the doctors and 4% on hospitals. That sounds like, something that we'd be paid a little extra money, but in reality what that is a tax. It's a 2% tax on our gross, in other words, before we pay our employees or any expenses.
So wait, let me get this straight then. The doctors and the hospitals will actually be funding the people who don't have insurance, so
right.
that everybody, well, children anyway, will have insurance.
Right.
It hardly seems fair to be taxing you guys for it. And we're already, in one of these other articles we're looking at here, we're already seeing a doctor shortage and a potential doctor shortage specifically in our county.
We have a doctor shortage in our county. In the past year, 10 primary care doctors have closed their practices for one reason or another. A couple of them for personal health reasons, but most of them because they found that there's an easier way to make a better living elsewhere.
Yeah, I would guess.
Right.
Well, how will this affect? Won't this, if this goes into effect, this new governor's idea, won't that create a further loss in doctors in California? Don't you think?
I would think so. I mean, if I were a new doctor coming out of training, and I had a job offer in California or in Oregon, and I knew I had to pay a 2% tax on on my gross income in California, but I didn't in Oregon, I'd go to Oregon.
You'd go to Oregon.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to make it worse. And actually, our state assemblyman, Sam Onestad, who happens to be an oral surgeon, there was an article quoting him in the paper recently, and I agree with him about that. That's his opinion also, is it's going to make the doctor shortage, particularly in rural areas, it's going to make it worse.
Well, aren't you guys, like, when you come out of school, don't you have like thousands and thousands of dollars of school debt, college financial aid and that sort of thing that you have to cover?
Absolutely.
And if you're looking at another 2% off the top of your income to help support people that don't have insurance, that's going to really kind of drive the nail into the coffin, I would think. If you don't mind my using that analogy.
We don't say coffin,
right.
Yeah, I mean, people come out of, you have your educational loans for college, and then you have educational loans for medical school, so it's not uncommon to have $200,000 in debt.
Plus, you have to open your office. You could have money to do that as well.
Right, right. So it's really driving people out of private practice, which is what Ubidox is, and into working for large corporate entities.
Isn't that what the hospitals are all turning into now anyway? Some corporate... a corporate group, they own like 3 or 4 or 5 to 10 hospitals around the country, and
that's fairly common. Our hospital here is still locally owned. It's affiliated with Mercy, but it's still locally owned, and there's a local board of directors, and so we're not quite there yet. But most new doctors are going to work for large corporations like Kaiser or Sutter Health or something like that.
And from what I know, my sister-in-law was a nurse, and they consolidated her hospital and a couple of others in Oakland. And what wound up happening there was the doctors, instead of being resident, were on call, and a lot of the RNs or the other nurses were taking on duties that would have been a doctor's duty. And then as you went down to the LVNs and whatever, suddenly they had tons more work to do, but it seemed as if the corporate guys were taking the big profit. Mm-hmm. And the patients were the ones that suffered as a result of it.
Right. Well, I mean, another thing in the governor's plan, it's going to be funded by a 2% tax on gross revenues of doctors and 4% of hospitals is the proposal. It doesn't say anything about capping profits of insurance companies or having insurance companies contribute or maybe taking a look at the salaries of CEOs of insurance companies, which have become like CEOs of other corporations and have just become astronomical recently.
Well, oil companies come to mind immediately to me.
Yeah, or maybe drug companies.
Yeah, and drug companies. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that, but one of my friends when I was living in Mill Valley was a pharmacist, and he was like fourth generation or something. I think his great-great-grandfather opened the pharmacy, and this guy was making about $5 an hour in order to be able to still offer services to people and pay his employees. And he mentioned to me that a lot of what was happening to him was old folks would have a certain heart medicine that they would always take. A pharmaceutical company would go, no, we're taking that's not going to be available. We're giving them this new one. The new one would have horrible side effects or not work. And they'd come back to him and there was nothing he could do about it. How does that affect you? Is that still going on? And is that affecting you guys as doctors?
Well, the drugs have a certain patent life. I think it's 17 years. And that's from the time when it's first developed till it goes off patent, at which point it becomes generic. When a drug goes generic, the drug companies lose interest fast because their big profit margin goes away. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, yeah, part of it. The more more of my concern would be here you are. You've got some life-threatening thing that's being alleviated by taking a certain amount of pills every day. Suddenly, the pharmaceutical company comes out with some new pill that's supposed to help you, but it doesn't work. Your old medicine worked fine. Now you can no longer get your old medicine. And then what happens?
To be honest, I haven't seen that where the generics are still available. In general,
I think. Well, all right. Maybe the point wasn't so much that they weren't available, but that the pharmaceutical companies were giving a special discount or kickback to the pharmacies and doctors who would recommend this other new medicine that's out. And part of that at the time, and admittedly, this is like 15 years ago we were talking about it, but part of that was like a sort of looking the other way on the part of the FDA now, or whoever regulates pharmaceuticals, to where before there were stringent tests and things run on these medicines before they were allowed even out into the populace, and now you're finding a lot of stuff is being pulled off the market because, we didn't realize that people were going to start dying from this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a whole other discussion.
Okay.
Because, I'll just, in 30 seconds, there's no kickbacks to doctors for doing drugs. I mean, that's really tightly regulated. And in fact, even the stuff that used to happen 10 years ago about, taking on golf trips and all that stuff's gone. And appropriately so, I think. And then there was a lot of complaints about drugs taking too long to get on the market, like drugs for AIDS or for critical conditions. So there's sort of a pendulum there, and I'm not defending the FDA or criticizing it, but there's a balance to be struck between testing it too long and having people die while they could be benefiting from the drug and releasing it too soon. And I'm sure there's, like everything else, there's politics involved there.
Yeah, it would seem. And admittedly, like I said, this is about 15 years ago when this was happening. Mm-hmm. It's kind of right around the time the medical marijuana was coming on board and all kinds of other things that, pharmaceutical companies are going, oh, no, something, good that somebody else can do for themselves might work. Well, right. Let's see. Would you prefer to talk about Ubidox specifically, the kinds of things that you treat? We kind of touched on that. Or should we focus a little bit more on health care in general in Nevada County?
I'll just say a little bit more about Ubidox. One thing is we have an X-ray on site. Oh. So we have our own X-ray facility, and so you come in with a possibly broken ankle, and or maybe you have pneumonia. We can do an X-ray right there. We also have limited lab capabilities on site, so we can do tests for strep throat or mono or influenza, pregnancy tests. Checking for urine infections or vaginal infections right there, without having you have to go anywhere. And we do a lot of suturing, a lot of, sewing up cuts, removing lumps and bumps, and taking care of broken bones.
Well, that's most of the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid.
Right.
What about these like stomach flus and things? How do you feel about that? I mean, it seems to me like there are a lot more flus going around than when I was younger, and there are all kinds of different degrees of length and painful stuff to deal with. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the flu is bad. There's no
Should
doubt.
people come to? I mean, if people were being a little more proactive about it, would they be wise to come to you earlier and say, "Hey, I'm concerned about getting the flu"?
Well, the word flu comes from influenza. Influenza, medically speaking, is a particular virus, and it's the one that caused the big epidemic in 1918 when 20 million people died. And it's also the one that there's a flu shot for, influenza. And if you come in early enough, there's actually medicine. It's one of the few viral illnesses where there's a specific medicine for it. So if you come in early enough, we can treat you for influenza with a particular medicine that works on it. But you have to start that within the first 48 hours.
So
how would you know you had the flu?
Yeah, I mean, would you see some symptoms, or would?
Okay, the influenza, which as I said, that's where the word comes from. But
Yeah.
you'd know you have influenza if the symptoms are a dry cough, a sore throat, a fever, muscle aches and pains. And I can't tell you how many people have said, "I feel like I've been hit by a truck." When somebody tells me, "I feel like I've been hit by a truck," it raises my suspicion that they have influenza.
Can you help them after the fact if they haven't been wise enough to come in for?
Yeah, if they're not there in the first 48 hours, maybe 72 hours we could stretch it. But beyond that, the antiviral medicines won't work, but we can still help them out.
Since I did mention shots, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was a lot of times people will say, "Hey, I didn't feel bad at all until I got my flu shot, and then I feel like I got something from that instead of the actual flu." Mm-hmm. Is that possible?
Some people get a mild reaction from the flu shot, yeah, and it's where they have some muscle aches or pains the next day, but it's nowhere near like having the actual flu. I mean, speak to somebody who's had it, who's had both, and the flu shot isn't 100% effective. I mean, it's about 80% effective.
But it helps.
Yeah, it reduces your chances of getting influenza, by 80%.
Let's. I was actually going to start asking you stuff about DPT and all these other things, but since we got like 10 minutes left, I'd prefer to, if you're willing to come back another time. I had a lot of other things we could talk about medically. Sure. What about the health care in Nevada County? How are we seeing things move now?
Okay, well, so we've lost 10 primary care physicians in the past year, and in a community this size, that's huge. Let's say, I'm talking about western Nevada County, where I think the population here is somewhere around 75,000, something like that, and about 15,000 in the Truckee area. So it's about 75,000. We should have one primary care doctor for every 2,000 to 3,000 people. So, we should have 20, maybe 30 primary care doctors here, and I think we have 13.
Man.
So it's a crisis. So it has a lot of effects, in my opinion. One is it has an effect on people who are going down the hill to Auburn or Roseville for primary care because they can't find a doctor here. I mean, we're seeing that all the time at UBDOCS. We're primarily in urgent care, but people come in every day and say, well, my doctor left, or my doctor's, I don't have a doctor, and I need my diabetes medicine or my high blood pressure medicine refilled. So, yeah, we take care of them.
Will you still take patients as, this is my doctor, for instance? Or are you so filled up with people you can't take anybody else?
Oh, no, we never turn people away for that reason.
Because that's something else I had heard, is that doctors just won't take any new patients, probably for this reason here.
Yeah, I mean, that all of the studies show 2,000 or 3,000 patients, and that practice is full. So, but we sort of have a different mission, which is that we want to provide health care to people when they need it.
Yeah, folks are from the folks that I know that take advantage of UBDOCS being there. A lot of times it's an emergency issue. Mm-hmm. Something happens and they go boom. They think of you immediately.
And again, I want to say, if you need an ambulance, then you really need the emergency room. But we can take care of most everything else.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the effects of the that's one of the effects of the shortage of primary care doctors, people going out of the community. And then that means, say they need, their knee replaced or something, they're going to their primary care doctor down in Roseville, so then the guy down there is going to refer them to an orthopedist in Roseville, because he doesn't know the ones up here.
Yeah, so any specialist up here is out of the loop completely.
Yeah, so the specialists are feeling the effect of, not having enough primary care. Another thing that happens is, if you were to relocate your company to a new community, one of the things that you're going to want to know about is, well, what's the healthcare situation in that community? Mm-hmm. And
sure.
If your employees can't find a doctor, then it might make you think twice about relocating your company here or keeping your company here. So it's not just the medical professionals or even the patients. It affects the whole economy of the county, in my opinion.
What can be done? How can we attract more doctors here? It sounds like between the insurance companies, corporations, and the pharmaceutical companies, they kind of got doctors and patients between a rock and a hard place.
Well, one thing that can be done is to let your elected officials know what you think about this situation and that we have a problem here. What I'm going to do is let my elected officials know. I'm going to let Sam Onnested know that I agree with him about this, that the governor's proposal, in my opinion, is likely to make the healthcare shortage worse in rural areas. And other people could do that also if they agree with me.
I would say, and one of the things that, I keep trying to hammer home to people on the show here is that you have to do your own due diligence and research. You can't just trust what the media tells you about everything. Mm-hmm. So if Governor Schwarzenegger wants to push this agenda that he's got, and the media supports him in this, because any health care is better than no health care, per se. So if they support him in this, maybe they'll just not know enough about the ramifications of it and just go, yeah, we're for this. They're the voting populace. Yeah. And then the doctors get stuck with the extra 2% or 4%. Plus, so anyway, my point being is that this kind of information is really valuable for people, and it needs to be weighed in all that consideration. Like, yeah, wow, it'd be great to have my kids have insurance, but if it's going to be at the expense of having a doctor, you might want to rethink that.
Yeah, definitely all children should have health care coverage, I think. I think all people should in a society like this. We certainly have the money. It's just a question of where we want to spend it, where we choose to spend it. So,
yeah, so there. So, and before we had about 5 minutes left. We talked about just to give people an idea of what's happening in the hospitals and in schools for doctors now. We talked before the show about medical school and residency and foreign mm-hmm. grads.
Right.
Can you just talk a couple minutes about that?
Sure. After medical school, doctors go to do a residency, which is like postgraduate training in a specialty. That could be neurosurgery, or being a gynecologist, or being a family doctor, or primary care doctor. Last year in 2006, for the first time ever, more than half of the primary care residency positions were filled by foreigners, and not even all of the positions were filled. So why is that? That's because Americans don't want to be primary care doctors anymore, because basically there's easier ways to make a better living, as a doctor.
It's got to be extremely stressful, too. You're dealing with people's health and mental and emotional well-being.
Right. And I don't know if you saw the articles in the paper, but primary care doctors in Nevada County make about half of what they do elsewhere in the country.
Oh, so attracting guys to come up here that don't even want to be doctors even.
Well, it's really, we're feeling that at UBIDOX. I'm, trying to recruit a doctor is really difficult to get somebody to come to this rural community, because they can earn more money easier doing primary care elsewhere.
And earlier on, the cost of living was a little bit less up
right.
here. At least housing costs were a little bit lower, but that seems to be catching up with the rest of the state as well.
Exactly. And, okay, here's another. Why do doctors here make less than elsewhere? Well, one reason is our reimbursement rates from Medicare is tied to Yuba County and Sierra and Plumas County, very rural and poor counties. Our rents are tied to San Francisco. So our rents go up at San Francisco rates, but we're reimbursed at Yuba County and Plumas and Modoc County rates.
And as we discussed earlier, because you're now, the other thing I wanted to point out was that thing where the patient is eliminated from the negotiations with the insurance company.
Yeah, right.
And that's a really irritating thing, which I have my own private issue with. But so why don't you tell the folks what that is, rather than me have to.
Well, when I
paraphrase
started
it.
out, the patient would go to the doctor would take care of the patient, give the patient a bill, the patient would submit the bill to his or her insurance company. Now, the patient buys insurance, comes in to see the doctor takes care of the problem, and the doctor submits the bill to the insurance company, and the patient's out of the loop. Most patients don't have any idea whether their insurance company, first of all, even pays the doctor, or when that happens. So if there's we get claims sent back all the time saying, oh, this isn't covered, or that isn't covered, or, you didn't dot this I or cross that T, the claim's incomplete. Patients don't know about that, number one. And number two, they're out of the loop as far as what things actually cost. Most people, when they buy an insurance policy, a medical insurance policy, they think, okay, I'm good. But, there's 500 to 1,000 different types of insurance policies, and the devil is in the details.
Yeah, and
so
the
I think
coverage is
and the other thing is, when we try, as a doctor, when we, go to bat with the insurance company, or go to battle, I should say,
Yeah.
we're not the customer. The patient is the one that bought the insurance policy. So the insurance companies, they don't really care, because, we're not the one paying them, the patient is.
Boy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's like a lot of the stuff I rail about here. Nobody can be held responsible for anything.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that happens is our overhead is high, because, like, with typical insurance patient-doctor situation in this county, you come in and you get taken care of your pneumonia, say, today on February 7th. The doctor doesn't get paid till October. Or
If you dotted all the right I's.
Yeah. That's right. So basically, the doctor's acting as a credit card company or a banker for the healthcare policy, which, for a mom and pop business like Yuba Docs, we can't do that. We can't be the banker for these gigantic insurance companies.
Okay, so folks, you've heard all this stuff now. And as I pointed out, it's wise to do your own due diligence and your own research on things. But these are the kinds of issues that should be dealt with in these health plan things that Governor Schwarzenegger or anybody else is coming up with. And those are things to be concerned about. I want to thank Dr. Hicks again, please, for coming on. And
You're welcome, man.
I'd like to have you come on again and talk a little bit more about some other things. If folks have any questions for Dr. Hicks or would like to have me address some other stuff, when he comes back on, please email me at loumeyer@nccn.net, and I'll make sure we touch on anything you're interested in the next time Dr. Hicks is on Reality Check. Thanks again for watching. I want to thank Terry and Trish for doing the behind-the-scenes work for us. We have a very skeleton crew today, and they did a great job. And next week, while you're watching this, it'll be Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day, and we'll see you again. Thanks for watching Reality Check.
Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
So important what Haiti Liberté